Okay.
Okay.
Yom Yerushalayim Sameach, everybody. Don't you know?
By the way, my neighbor told me that she was listening outside. She was sitting on her bench and listening to the class.
Oh, wow. Okay. Next time says that she can. Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm very happy that you know how to do things. At least you know how to get things done.
Baruch Hashem. Thank God. Okay. All the best.
Be well. Thanks a lot.
Okay. There it is. Enjoy.
Okay.
Okay. Yom Yerushalayim Sameach. Time to begin our regular halacha shiur. Before I begin, let me ask you what I want to talk about today is we're coming up to Shavuos, where of course there's a minhag to have halavi, milchik. So I want to talk about the waiting time between milchik and fleischik. But before I come to that, let me ask you, as usual, whether you have any questions of a halachic nature that you wish to begin with.
Yeah, I have some. Yeah. Okay, this may be, you may think it provocative and you may not want to answer, but it's something, it's nothing to do.
Provocative is good.
Yeah. So
machlokas argument is the power of the Beis Midrash. That's what keeps Torah learning going. Okay, let's have it.
Okay, the thing is, and we can put it off, but I'll ask it. It's about the bus culture. And when I get on the bus and I've got lots of pekalach and I'm an older person and I see young men of the very orthodox persuasion who would never dream of getting up, my question is, would I be doing a mitzvah to ask them, would you please stand up for me so I can sit down?
Good question.
Very good question. I agree.
And they are not just sitting, they are looking at their chumash or gemara or some book very deeply.
I said it very nicely. You know, I won't add my feelings. It's just that it's been something that I've been thinking about.
Yes, well, your problem is that you have a fundamental misunderstanding of Jewish culture, of Torah culture. Women are supposed to know their place, and if women don't know their place, to stand in the back of the bus while the boys and the men can sit down, well, that's a problem. The women need to be rebuked and taught what their proper place is. That would be a cultural response to your question. Let me see if I can address the question from a halachic point of view.
Right. Okay.
From a Torah point of view, one must distinguish between boys who are over bar mitzvah and under bar mitzvah. It's easy enough to tell the difference because the ones over bar mitzvah have the hat and the ones under bar mitzvah don't. If the child is under bar mitzvah, then the obligation to stand up for older people and give older people the seat, this is part of the general mitzvah of chinuch, and it's the responsibility of the parents to decide when the child is mature enough, when the child is old enough to begin certain mitzvahs. Every mitzvah, every child is different, and some children mature faster, some children never mature. But it's the parents who have to decide when the child is ready for some specific halacha to start keeping. Well, we're going to talk today about the waiting time. Is the child mature enough to start waiting 1 hour between meat and milk, 3 hours, 6 hours, whatever it is? It's the parents who have to decide up to bar mitzvah. At the age of bar mitzvah, the parents' special obligation of chinuch expires, and now it becomes the general obligation of the public. And therefore, if you're talking about and therefore, if you're talking about a boy with a hat that's over bar mitzvah, then you are definitely in place. definitely correct to ask the boy, to tell the boy, of course, politely. You don't need me to tell you to be polite. I mean, that's sort of obvious, isn't it? To tell the boy to stand up and give the place to an older person, whether. But if it's under bar mitzvah, one should not interfere with the parents' control over the child's chinuch.
Well,
Okay.
or
Yes.
she may take it as a compliment. She doesn't look like an older person, so he doesn't recognize it.
She's older than the
they are.
chuchikim, older than the chuchikim, older than the youngsters who are sitting in the seats.
Can't make
That's enough. Okay. Well,
Thank you.
it's a problem.
It is a
indeed
problem.
it is indeed a problem. And as you correctly point out, some tiny element in the problem is that as men get older, men's age becomes more apparent on their face, lack of hair. Women do a good job in disguising their aging. That's true. That might be a tiny element, but it's still no excuse for the woman is obviously older than the children. I mean, they should see that right away. Okay, are there other halachic issues that that you would wish to address before?
The question.
Cody?
Thank you. Good evening. Good morning. Whatever. The relating to inclusion of Tehillas Hashem after benching, the end of benching. No, at the end of Shir Malo. What's the issue there?
Minhag, pure minhag. It's primarily the minhag of German Jewish communities to add it, but there's surely no objection to the minhag one way or another, either saying it or not saying it. I know that my grandfather, who was born and grew up in the German Jewish, in the Yekish Kehila in Frankfurt, used to say it was enough for David HaMelech to end that chapter of Tehillim where he added it, so we don't have to add more. And he grew up in a community where the minhag was indeed to add the extra phrase, purely a matter of minhag, and therefore.
Really? So there's no other kind of cultural significance or anything in it?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. What the Gemara and the Poskim do say is that one should recite Birkat HaMazon mitoch divrei Torah. One should have divrei Torah preceding Birkat HaMazon. Now, as far as the Gemara and the Poskim are concerned, it doesn't matter particularly what the Divrei Torah are, but one should have Divrei Torah before Birkat HaMazon. The reason for this is, as it says in Pirkei Avot, Shlosha she'achlu b'yachad, if people eat together a meal, v'lo amru Divrei Torah, but they did not have any Divrei Torah before Birkat HaMazon, Ki'ilu achlu zivchei mesim, it's as though they've eaten sacrifices to the dead. Now, I don't know how familiar you are with non-Jewish culture, but let me illustrate one chapter of non-Jewish culture from antiquity. The Ugarit goddess Kret was her name. We know an awful lot about her because the people in Ugarit were happy to leave us tons, quite literally tons, of clay tablets, with all the teachings of Kret. She was the goddess of the death cult. This was the single most popular avodah zarah in the ancient Near East. But by far the most popular avodah zarah in the ancient Near East, and it still exists today in certain ramifications. she was a black goddess. The last time she was physically observed was when Muhammad attacked the Kaaba, when his son-in-law attacked the Kaaba in Saudi, and they began throwing stones at the Kaaba, and the goddess of the Kaaba fled. She was a black goddess, and the shomer, the guard of the shrine, called out to her, "Oh, Uzi, protect thyself." She was the goddess of the death cult. Now, one of the primary rituals of the death cult was to have a festive meal when someone died. The festive meal would often be in the cemetery, but not necessarily. The festive meal celebrating the death of so-and-so took place at night. Dogs were chained to the candles that illuminated the room where the festive funerary feast took place, and at the proper time, the dogs would be they would wake up the dogs, who would then knock over the candles, and that was the time for the orgy to begin. This was by far the most popular avodah zarah in the ancient Near East, and this is exactly what Chazal are referring to. People who eat together and do not say divrei Torah, it's ki'ilu. It's as though they offered sacrifices. Zivchei metim. It's as though they offered sacrifices to the dead. It's like a funerary feast in honor of the goddess of Kret. Well, here we see the importance of divrei Torah during the meal. As far as the halacha is concerned, it could be any divrei Torah will satisfy the halacha. The common minhag is shir hama'alot, and whether one adds extra verses or not is purely a matter of minhag. Indeed, shir hama'alot is a matter of minhag. As far as the halacha is concerned, any divrei Torah would be sufficient.
So where does the Tehillat Hashem thing come from?
I don't know what the origin is, but it's surely some early German, some early Yiddish source, but I don't have it in mind at the moment. I don't know. Let me just point out that in Poland today, the black goddess of the death cult seems to be alive and well. In Polish nunneries, the Madonna who is venerated in Polish nunneries today is painted black. Regardless of the material out of which the idol is made, it's always painted black. The Black Madonna, which seems to be a remnant of the old goddess of the death cult, still alive and well in Poland. Well, okay. Now you know as much as you have to know about avodah zarah. Okay, another issue. Yes.
Kvod Harav,
Yes.
does it apply only on Shabbat or also
No.
during the weekdays?
All week long, all week long. One
Thank
should
you.
say Shabbat. So some people say Al Naharot Bavel during the week, a different Tehillim. Some people say Shir Hamalot even during the week. Some people say Al Naharot Bavel only during the 9 days leading up to Tisha B'Av. Well. The point is some divrei Torah during the meal before Birkat Hamazon. That's the whole idea.
Anytime we wash for bread.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there other issues that we should address now before we turn to Shavuos? Okay, let me get the stuff on the screen. I'm pretty good at this. Here we are. Waiting time between meat and milk. The source of the whole idea is in the Gemara. Amar Rav Chisda teaches us in the Gemara, Achal basar, if someone ate meat, asur lechol gevina, you're not allowed to eat cheese after you ate meat. Rashi explains, Mishum de basar motzi shuman, v'hu nidbak b'peh u'marich ta'amo. Meat has fat in it. Most of the taste of the meat is in the fat. You know, if you get nicely marbled meat, or you get minced meat with higher fat content, so of course it has more taste. The taste of the meat is mostly in the fat, and the fat stays around in the mouth, and you taste it longer, and that's why you shouldn't have cheese after meat, because you still have the taste of meat in your mouth. Gvina, if you had first cheese, mutar lechol basar, there's no waiting time for having meat after cheese. That's what Rav Chisda said in the Gemara. Well, now, of course, we have to say, what are the other opinions? You know, like there's hardly anything in the Gemara which is agreed to by everyone. That's what Rav Chisda had to say. Amalei Rav Acha bar Rav Yosef Rav Chisda, Rav Acha attacked Rav Chisda along the following lines. Basar sheben hashinayim, mahu. What about meat that gets stuck between the teeth? What is the status of that meat? Mi chashiv basar, Rashi says, is the meat which is stuck between your teeth considered to be still meat, and 3 hours later, 6 hours later, 2 days later, if you don't brush, back in those days, they didn't have toothbrushes. If you don't brush your teeth and still have meat stuck between your teeth, does that still have the status of meat, and therefore you can't eat cheese? Karile, Rav Chisda responded with a basar. Habasar odenu ben hashinayim. Meat gets stuck between the teeth. Rashi says, Alma Mikre Basar, the verse in the Torah describes meat stuck between the teeth as being meat, and therefore it retains its halachic identity as meat, and therefore if you have meat stuck in your mouth, between the teeth and the gums, wherever, it doesn't matter. If you have any meat stuck in the mouth, then you can't have cheese. That's like having meat and cheese together. Well, other opinions here. The Gemara goes on and says, Amar Rav Ukva. Rav Ukva has something to say about this issue. Ana, he speaks about himself. Rav Ukva says, Ana, ani, I, laha milsa, regarding this matter of milk and meat being separated, regarding the separation of milk and meat, regarding this, I am chala bar chamra. I am vinegar as compared to wine. Wine is a lot better than vinegar. Of course, I'm like vinegar. When wine goes bad, it turns into vinegar. I'm like wine, which has gone bad and turned into vinegar. Legabe Abba, when compared to my father. Rav Ukva's father was fine wine. Rav Ukva said regarding himself, I'm vinegar. I'm not as good as my father as far as separating meat and milk is concerned. Dilu Abba, as far as my father's practice is concerned, ki hava ochel bisra, whenever he ate meat, ha'idna, on one day, lo hava ochel gavina ad lemachar, he wouldn't eat cheese for a whole day, ki ad hashta, until the time of day. When he ate the meat, he would wait a full 24 hours. As Rashi says, me'et la'et, from 3 o'clock to 3 o'clock, a full 24 hours, he would wait until eating cheese. My father, he was frum. He separated the eating of meat and milk by at least 24 hours. Iluana, but me, the son says, I don't eat milk and meat in the same meal. But in the next meal, achilna, I do eat cheese. Well, according to Rav Ukva, that his father's practice was better. His father's practice was better, 24 hours separation. But Rav Ukva himself, if he ate meat at the end of the meal, he would bench, end the meal with Birkat Hamazon, or whatever the appropriate bracha would be, change the tablecloth, because you're not allowed to have milk and meat on the same tablecloth, and then immediately have cheese. Waiting time, a total of a few minutes, as long as it takes to recite Birkat Hamazon and change the tablecloth. That was Mar Ukva's position, from one meal to the next. Well, some diversity of thought here in the Gemara about how to separate the eating of meat from in the eating of cheese. I just point out in passing that I cannot count the number of times people have told me that, of course, children have to follow the practices of their parents. Of course, the son has to observe the mitzvahs the way the father did. Of course, the daughter has to embrace the practices of her mother. I can't count the number of times I've heard this. Well, that idea seemed to be unknown back in the days of the Gemara. After all, Rav Ukva is quite open about his disagreement with his father. His father waited 24 hours, and he waited just a few minutes in separating meat and milk. Now, the reason for separating, we already saw Rashi's idea when we were looking at the Gemara. According to Rashi, it's because of the taste of meat, which lasts longer in the mouth. And since the taste lasts longer, that's the reason for separation. You don't want to eat cheese while you still have the taste of meat in your mouth. That was Rashi. And we saw Rashi when we were looking at the Gemara. Rambam, on the other hand, has a different explanation for why we separate meat and milk. Mi sha'achal basar b'tchila. If you eat meat first, ben basar behema, ben basar oaf, doesn't matter whether it's beef or chicken, doesn't matter whether it's meat of Torah status, a mammal, or meat of rabbinic status, fowl, it doesn't matter. If it's some kind of meat, either minat Torah or midarabanan, lo yochal acharav chalav, you shouldn't have cheese afterwards, ad sheyishhe beinehem, unless you wait between the meat and cheese, kedei shi'ur su'uda acheret. Kedei shi'ur, the period of time between meals. Oh, what is waiting? Rambam apparently understood. Mar Ukva was the one who said, in one meal I'll have meat, in the next meal I'll have cheese. Rambam apparently understood that Rav Ukva, of course, wouldn't have two meals, one right after another. Rather, he had the normal interval of time between meals. And what is the normal interval of time between meals? Well, you have a meal in the early morning. You get up before sunrise. You daven at sunrise. Then you have breakfast. Around 6 hours later, around noontime, you have the midday meal. And then around 6 hours later, you have the evening meal before going to sleep. And therefore, these are still the words of the Rambam, hu kamo sheshot. The interval of time between meals is around 6 hours. Let me just point out in passing that this word kamo has disturbed me for many years. The word kamo in Hebrew means domeh le, like or similar to. That's what the word kamo means. And the Rambam seems to be using the word kamo to mean approximately. And that's a very strange meaning for the word kamo. It bothered me for many years. until just this year, I found a source for it in the Psikta de Rav Kahana. The Psikta de Rav Kahana is a midrash which tells a story about a king who was living in the capital city, and the residents of the city bothered the king. I guess they were making too much noise at night. I don't know what the people were doing, but the people were bothering the king. Ka'asa Melech, the king got mad at the people. So there's a story in the midrash, in the Psikta, in the Psikta de Rav Kahana. The king got angry. Yatsa mitocha, he left the city. Kemo asara milin, kemo, approximately 10 miles. Right? Mile in Latin means 1,000 paces. Right? That's what a mile is, 1,000 paces. So here I finally found a mucker in Chazal where the word kemo means approximately, and that's apparently what the Rambam is basing himself on. In any event, according to Rambam, the waiting time is kemo, around approximately 6 hours. Mipnesha basar ben hashinayim eino sar bekinuach. You cannot easily remove the meat which is stuck between the teeth, even if you clean your teeth. They didn't have toothbrushes in those days. They didn't have dental floss in those days. Even if you rinse your mouth out, you're still going to have some meat stuck between your teeth. So according to Rashi, the reason for the waiting time is because of the taste. According to Rambam, the reason for the waiting time is because of the meat stuck between the teeth. Now, this leads to differences in applying the halacha. If it has to do, like Rambam says, with meat stuck between the teeth, what about eating chicken soup or beef soup? What if there's no substance of meat to get stuck between the teeth? According to Rashi, it's still a problem. According to Rambam, it's not a problem. What if back in those days you couldn't go to the store and buy baby food? Back in those days, one of the jobs that the mother had was preparing baby food when the baby gets old enough to begin solid food. The mother, of course, would chew the meat and then feed the baby the chewed meat. Well, according to Rambam, since the meat was in the mouth and was being chewed, it gets stuck between the teeth. You have a waiting time. But according to Rashi, maybe there's no reason for a waiting time in this case. According to Rashi, it all depends upon taste. According to Rambam, it all depends upon whether or not the meat gets stuck between the teeth. In the Tur, he said, it doesn't matter whether you swallow the meat or not. It doesn't matter whether you chew the meat or not. None of this matters because we are mahmir according to both opinions. We embrace both opinions, that of Rambam and that of Rashi, and therefore the waiting time applies whether or not you swallow the meat. You just taste it, for example. Whether or not you chew the meat, maybe it's soup and there's nothing to chew. It doesn't matter. The wait time is always in place. These are the words of the Tur. Tov le'echos kechumrei shnei ta'amim. And of course he says tov le'echos. It's recommended. It's good. It's advisable. It's praiseworthy. We advise the people to be strict according to both opinions, both according to Rashi's understanding and according to Rambam's understanding. And the Meforshim, the commentaries led by the Prima Gadim, say, even though we have two different understandings, Rashi and Rambam, for why there's a waiting time, and even though in general, in every other situation, we would have to come to a conclusion, a decision, one way or the other, which opinion to embrace, in this case, we can embrace both opinions. They're not contradictory opinions. After all, both could be correct. Normally in the Gemara, when or in the Rishonim, normally amongst the poskim, when you have two opinions, they somehow contradict each other, and you can't simultaneously hold both. In this particular case, there is no contradiction between the two opinions. They might both be true, and therefore we can follow both. Okay, all of that is background. That's the Gemara. That's the Rishonim. Now we have to see how the contemporary poskim view all of this. Let's begin with the Shulchan Aruch. These are the words of the Shulchan Aruch. Achal basar, someone who ate meat, afilu shel chaya v'of, doesn't matter whether it's a domesticated animal, a behema, or a wild animal, a chaya, or an oaf, a fowl, a bird, doesn't matter what kind of meat it is. Lo yochal gvina, you shouldn't have cheese after it until you wait sheish sha'ot, 6 hours. The Shulchan Aruch is definitive. 6 hours is the waiting time. Rambam had said, kamo sheish sha'ot, around 6 hours, according to Shulchan Aruch. 6 hours is the minimum waiting time. Now remember that when the Shulchan Aruch said that, they did not have precise clocks. In the 16th century, early 16th century, when the Shulchan Aruch wrote this, telling the time was always a very vague proposition. There's certain times, certain halachic times during the day where you can be very precise. For example, hanetz. Can I get that on chat? I think. There it is. Hanetz achama, sunrise. It's a very precise moment in time. If you have unobstructed view of the horizon, when the top of the disk of the sun makes its first appearance over the horizon, the first spark of the sun becomes visible over the horizon, that's Hanetz Hama, that's the precise moment of sunrise. If you have an unobstructed view of the horizon, that's a very precise point in time. Shkia, let's get Shkia typed there also. Shkia, sunset, is also a very precise point in time. When the top of the disk of the sun disappears beneath the horizon, assuming you have unobstructed view, that's the precise moment of Shkia. Chatzot Hayom, noon to halachic noon time. Halachic noon time is when the sun is directly overhead, exactly in the middle between sunrise and sunset. In the summer, there's greater time between sunrise and sunset. In the winter, there's shorter time between sunrise and sunset. But exactly in the middle, when the sun is exactly overhead, that's Chatzot Hayom, midday, halachic midday. And if it's not a cloudy day, you could put a pole, a stick in the ground, exactly perpendicular to the ground, observe the shadow, and the shadow will tell you precisely when Chatzot Hayom is. These are 3 halachic times during the day where precision was possible back in the 16th century when the Shulchan Aruch was written. All the other halachic times during the day, Sof Zman Tefillah, 6 hours waiting, all the other halachic times were really somewhat vague. As the Gemara says in Psachim, the reason we stop eating chametz on Erev Pesach in the morning is in order to distance ourselves from the time when the Torah prohibition really clicks into place, because in the words of the Gemara, Adam to'eh b'sha'ah. If you ask someone what time, back in those days, you ask someone what time is it, you can look at the sun and estimate within an hour the correct time of day. Oh, back in those days, estimation of time was thought to be correct within an hour or so. And therefore, when the Rambam said kamo shesh sha'ot, the Shulchan Aruch says we don't need the word kamo, because anyway, no one can measure 6 hours in a precise manner. Of course, nowadays times have changed. Nowadays we have very precise timekeepers. We have very precise clocks and watches, and therefore today there are people who are very precise in counting the 6 hours. Not only is there an interval of time, the Shulchan Aruch says. Shulchan Aruch goes on and says, afilu im shaha kashir, even if you waited 6 hours, im yesh basar ben hashinaim, if you still have meat stuck in the mouth between your teeth, tzarich lahasira, you have to remove the meat which is stuck in your mouth. Halo es latinok, someone who just chews the food to feed the baby, tzarich lamtin, also has a 6-hour waiting time. Okay, the Machaber, Rabbi Yosef Kara, was quite clear. 6 hours is the waiting time. 6 hours plus making sure the mouth is clean, being sure that there's no meat stuck in the mouth. And surprisingly, throughout the Sephardic world, it's the opinion of the Machaber which is embraced. 6-hour waiting. The Ramah, Rav Moshe Isserles, the father of Ashkenaz practice, adds the following note. Yesh omrim, some people say, and that's his code expression for the Ashkenaz team. Ashkenaz team says, Ein tzarich lamtin sheishot. No. Ashkenazim don't wait 6 hours. Rak miyad. Ashkenazim have no waiting time, like Mar Ukva. Im silek ubeirech birkat hamazon, if you had a meat meal and you removed the dishes, you cleaned up the table and you changed the tablecloth and you said birkat hamazon, ending the meat meal, mutar al yedei kinuach v'hadacha, just make sure your mouth is clean and there's no meat stuck in it, and you can have cheese immediately. Oh, that's the opinion of the Ashkenaz poskim. You're probably wondering what happened to these Ashkenaz poskim. Nowadays we haven't heard of them anymore. But back in the days of the Ramah, he lived in the 16th century in Poland. That was the opinion of the Ashkenaz rabbis. The Ashkenaz poskim embraced the opinion of Mar Ukva, understanding Rav Ukva when he said, I wait from one meal to the next. Oh, the next meal could be just a few minutes later. How long does it take to recite Birkat Hamazon and change the tablecloth? That's how long you have to wait, and just make sure your mouth is clean. But the Ramah says, that's the halacha. The minhag in Ashkenaz territory, minhag pashut, in modern Hebrew, pashut means simple or easy, but in rabbinic Hebrew, ani poshet et hayad, I extend the hand. Minhag pashut is the minhag which is extended all over Medinot Elu, all over Ashkenaz territory. The minhag in all of Ashkenaz territory spread all over Ashkenaz territory. Lahamtin achar achilas, the minhag is to have a waiting time after meat. Sha'a achat, 1 hour. Oh, the halacha is no waiting time, as long as you say Birkat Hamazon, change the tablecloth, and clean your mouth. The minhag is Birkat Hamazon, change the tablecloth, and wait 1 hour. That's the Ashkenaz minhag. V'ochli machakach kavina, then you can have cheese after 1 hour waiting time. Of course, you have to say Birkat Hamazon after the meat meal, because it has to be a different meal when you're having the cheese. Az havik suda acheres. If you make birkat hamazon, then when you eat the cheese, it's going to be a new meal, and therefore you can have cheese. The halacha is it can be right away. The minig is it has to be an hour later. Waiting an hour is not enough. You need to make it halachically a separate meal, and therefore birkat hamazon is required. Ein chiluk im himtin shah kodem birkat hamazon o achar kach. The waiting time does not begin with birkat hamazon. The waiting time begins when you finished eating the meat. Now, when you finish eating the meat, until you say birkat hamazon, that could be a long time. You go to a wedding, it could be an hour or two between eating the meat and birkat hamazon. Well, the interval, the waiting time, the clock on the waiting time begins when you finish eating the meat, not when you bench. Yesh medaktikim lahamdin sheshon. Some people are from, some people are very from, and they wait 6 hours after meat before cheese. V'chein nachon lasot. That's correct. That's good. That's good. So amongst the Ashkenazim, there are 3 levels. Number 1, the halacha, no waiting time at all. Just bench, change the tablecloth, clean your mouth. How many minutes can that take? Not a lot. The minhag, however, is to wait 1 hour, calculated from the time you stopped eating meat. Nachon, what is nachon, what is proper and advisable and commendable is sheshot. Okay, in fact, most of the people who were in those days were waiting 1 hour. That was the common minhag, but the Ramah still recommended a 6-hour wait. Now, as the Shach points out, if there is no meat stuck in your mouth between the teeth, which could well be, surely if you just had soup, that's true, but even if you had meat, it's not necessarily stuck between the teeth, is it? Then 1 hour is sufficient, and that's all you need. If there's nothing to clean, because because no meat is stuck between your teeth, if there's nothing to clean between your teeth, then obviously you don't have to do that. The Taz, the other principal commentary, the 2 principal commentaries are the Shach and the Taz. The other principal commentary, the Taz, says, Davar Pasha, it's obvious. The Mishin Noheg Bekul Zol Hamtin Sha'achat Tzarich Kinuach. It's obvious that if you're following the common practice of 1 hour, of course, you have to make sure that your mouth is clean. The Shach says flat out, Ein Tzarich Shehiyah Sheish Sha'ot. You don't need 6 hours from when you clean your mouth. You don't need 6 hours from when you bench. The 6-hour clock or the 1 hour clock, whichever minhag you're following, begins when you finish eating the meat. Now we've accounted for the 1 hour minhag. Let me just point out in passing that according to the Zohar HaKadosh, one should not eat meat and milk b'seuda achat, in one meal, v'lo b'sha'a achat. Those are the words of the Zohar HaKadosh. Lo b'seuda achat, v'lo b'sha'a achat. You can't have meat and milk in the same meal, and you can't have them in the same hour. Well, you see that the Zohar HaKadosh is definitively on the side of 1 hour waiting time. And although the Ramah does not say that his source is in the Zohar, I think it's fairly clear that that's where he got the idea of 1 hour waiting time. That's the basis of the minhag of Ashkenaz, waiting 1 hour. Now, as I'm sure you know, there's also a fairly common minhag of waiting 3 hours. The minhag of waiting 3 hours, which was more or less standard amongst German Jews before the Shoah. Not many of them left after the Shoah, and still in England and in the Commonwealth countries, there's still many people who wait 3 hours. This minhag has to do with calculating sha'ot zmaniot. After all, 3 hours in the winter is a shorter interval of time than 3 hours in the summer when you calculate hours as being 1/12 of the interval between sunrise and sunset. Those are sha'ot zmaniot, 1/12 of the interval between sunrise and sunset. Hours are longer in the summer and shorter in the winter, according to this calculation. And the 3 hour minhag probably derives from waiting three relative hours in the winter, which turns out to be around 60 minutes in northern latitudes. But it really doesn't matter. Minhag is minhag, and asking what the halachic source of a minhag is the wrong question. Minhagim do not have halachic sources. If there were a halachic source, it wouldn't be a minhag, it would be a halacha. The minhag is either 1 hour, 3 hours, 6 hours, kamo shesh sha'ot. There are many people, particularly of Lithuanian origin, who wait into the 6th hour. There's 5 hours plus a little bit more. Well, if that's the minhag, for those people, that's the minhag. Now, at this point, we have to talk about exceptions. What about people who are sick or people who have the status of being sick? Halachically speaking, back in those days, they didn't know about pathogens and they didn't know about blood levels and they didn't know about all the things that modern medicine knows about. Back in those days, when they spoke about choleh, someone sick, what they meant was someone who cannot function normally. In the words of the Ramban, and this is the opinion embraced by the modern poet, Mi she'eino mithalech bashuk kibari, someone who cannot function normally in the marketplace. If you're holy, if your sickness is such that it prevents you from functioning normally, then you have the halachic status of being sick. There are headaches and there are headaches. Some headaches, well, it's not so bad. I can just go about my ordinary activities in the normal way. You do not have the halachic status of being sick. Other headaches are worse. No, I just cannot function normally. I cannot eat a meal the way I normally eat a meal. I cannot read a book the way I normally read a book. That person has the halachic status of being sick. There are stomach aches and so forth, on and on and on. Halachically, being sick does not depend upon blood levels, does not depend upon cultures of pathogens in the blood or any such thing. Halachically, being sick depends upon whether or not you can function normally. Now, if you think about it for a moment, you'll realize that there are many categories of people who are perfectly healthy as far as modern medicine is concerned, but still cannot function normally. I'll give you an example. You might find this hard to believe. I know you have no experience with this. Trust me on this. It's fairly common for pregnant women who are perfectly healthy, have not the slightest medical problem. The physician says you're fine, you're perfectly normal, perfectly healthy, but it's fairly common that the pregnant woman cannot function normally. She has this pain, she has that pain, she's tired, she's exhausted, she just cannot go about normal activities the way she does when she's not pregnant. Although medically speaking, she's in no sense sick, halachically speaking, she falls into the category of choleh. The same thing, the same idea applies, for example, to elderly people. You get to a certain age where, although the physician says, there's nothing wrong with you, You complain to the doctor, you feel tired, you can't do this, you can't do that. And the doctor examines you and does all kinds of tests and says, you're perfectly healthy. You have no medical problem, but still, he or she cannot function normally. That's halachically speaking sick, and therefore, all the leniencies, whether we're talking about Hilchot Shabbat or any other area of halacha, all the leniencies which apply to sick people apply to people who cannot function normally, whether or not the physician considers them sick. The Chochmas Adam says, Im lo matzah basar ben hashinayim eino tzarich hadacha. Makom makom litzorach chole ketzas, someone who is chole ketzat, someone who is a little bit sick, that is, someone who has a little bit of problem in functioning normally, nearly pashut is obvious. Yesh lahatir afilu lim achal basar behema, even if he ate beef, la'achar sheyamtin sha'ah, it's enough to wait 1 hour for someone who is sick. Yahatet shinav, just clean his teeth after Birkat Hamazon, and 1 hour should surely be enough for someone who is halachically sick. And that includes, as I illustrated, a broad swath of the population. Now, the Chatam Sofer, our favorite Hungarian posek, says as follows, Pashut, Dechola, it's obvious that a sick person, and for some reason not clear to me, when the Chatam Sofer gets quoted by other poskim, they add the word cholek. In the original text, it just says chola, but it really doesn't matter. Anyone who is dysfunctional, just too tired, too exhausted, too weak to function normally. The headache is too strong to function, or whatever the reason is, the person cannot function in the market as he or she would normally market. Shotel l'refuato, eino tzarich lahamtin achar achilas basar yoter misha'ah. 1 hour is sufficient to wait if you are halachically ill. Achakach, you first have to do Birkat Hamazon, make sure your mouth is clean, and then you can drink milk. The Aruch HaShulchan says the same thing. Well, I could make the list much longer, but you got the... Yes, question?
Yes, Kvod Harav, each time you say Birkat Hamazon, we say Birkat Hamazon also if they don't eat bread, or we just assume that with every meat they eat bread also?
In those days, they ate bread at every meal. In fact, most of what they ate was bread.
Okay.
But the halacha is Birkat Hamazon, or whatever the appropriate bracha would be after the meat. Alamechia or Bari Nefashot, whatever the appropriate bracha is. That's all you need.
Thank you. May I ask another question?
Sure.
So today, and I don't know where that minhag came from, but I know many people who would wait 6 hours after beef and 3 hours after chicken. What is the basis for that?
Oh, you know some of those people.
Yeah, many.
This practice is particularly common in Yemenite circles. And after the Teimanim came to Eretz Yisrael, so other people saw what the Teimanim were doing, and this became this acquired some popularity, as you point out. Well, once again, the question, what is the halachic source for this minhag or that minhag, is the wrong question. If there were a halachic source, it wouldn't be a minhag, it would be a halacha. Here we're talking about minhag. The Rav Fink rule of minhagim is terribly important, and how fortunate you are to be able to hear the Rabbi Fink rule that governs all minhagim. Here goes. Minhag is as minhag does. Isn't that beautiful? That's great, right? Minhag is as minhag does. That means that what you do or what you don't do is your minhag. If we're not talking about something which is halachically regulated, if we're not talking about something which is usur according to halacha or mandatory according to halacha, if we're outside of halachic requirements, what you do, or what you don't do is your minhag. Of course, there are community-wide minhagim as well. That's minhag hamakom, but it's of course historically interesting to look through historical books about what the historical origin of a minhag might be. But this is neither here nor there. It really doesn't matter in the slightest. Minhag is determined by what you do and what you don't do. That's all there is to it.
What am I doing afterwards?
That's their minhag.
Because I took your
Okay, to round out the idea. Yes.
So now the question is how long something has to be a minhag, because if those people adopted it from the Teimanim, then it's not their minhag avot. It's a new kind of minhag.
How long does it have to be in place? Regarding this, the poskim are divided. According to most poskim and the Shulchan Aruch, one time is enough if you intend to accept this upon yourself as an ongoing practice. Someone who intends to have a minhag of only Chalav Yisrael, the first time he or she drinks Chalav Yisrael, now that's the minhag. But it has to be with the intention. If Chalav Yisrael happens to be what's on the table and you put it into your coffee, well, you didn't drink it with the intention that it would be your minhag, but the one time is enough, according to the Shulchan Aruch and most poskim. The Shulchan Aruch of the Baal Tanya, the first Lubavitcher Rebbe, said 3 times is necessary in order for the minhag to become a minhag. So it's fairly simple to accept upon yourself a minhag. Incidentally, good advice of all the great poskim is, do not accept upon yourself any new minhagim. It's difficult to predict the future unless you have the power of prophecy. Accepting upon yourself a new minhag, there's no way to know whether in the future your minhag is going to get you into hot water. It would be better not to accept upon yourself any new minhag. You want to limit yourself to Chalav Yisrael? Fine, drink only Chalav Yisrael, but don't accept it upon yourself as a permanent, ongoing minhag. And then, if you get into trouble at some point in the future, you'll be able to stop. Let's just complete the discussion by speaking about minika, a woman who is nursing a baby, a lactating mother, o yoledis, or a woman who is pregnant, a lactating mother, a nursing mother, or a pregnant woman who needs milk because that's what she wants to drink. She doesn't have to wait 6 hours after meat. It's enough to wait 1 hour and make sure the mouth is clean. Those are the words of Rabbi Yitzchak Zilberstein, who today is the leading Rav in Bnei Brak. Tov, so these are the basic ideas of separating milk and meat, and this obviously has application on Shavuos, when there's a common minhag and not a halachic obligation, a common minhag to have a milchik meal. So go for it, to find minhag, and just bear in mind the requirements of waiting between meat and milk. Okay, any other questions?
Thank you, and Chag Shavuot Sameach.
Chag Sameach l'kulam.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or issues we should talk about?
Yeah, Rav.
Okay.
Wait, let me just start my
Philip.
camera.
Philip.
So the Rav talked about hours and measuring hours.
I have to greet you properly. Good day, mate.
Good day, Rav. So the Rav talked about hours, 6 hours. I assume that's like 66 normal hours of 1 hour per 60
normal
minutes.
Hours, correct.
Okay, so how did they measure that in those days?
They couldn't. And therefore, since we're talking about not a din min haTorah and not a din midrabanan, since we're talking about a minhag, the idea of safek deraisa lechumra, safek derabanan lekula, of course, if it's reasonable that 6 hours might have passed, that's sufficient. You don't need vadai, since we're not talking about a din Torah here. We're very far away from a din Torah. As long as it's reasonable that 6 hours would have passed. Now, even nowadays, many people don't look exactly at the clock when they have the last swallow of meat. They don't know exactly what time it was. Well, around 6 hours later, you want to have a cup of coffee with milk. Is it reasonably possible that 6 hours have elapsed? If so, go for the milk.
Okay, so that's that type of hour, but the Rav mentioned Shkia and Netzachama, those are exact measurements.
Right.
And
but Sofsman Kriya Shema is only an estimate, but that's Minat Torah.
Right.
And therefore,
Right.
you have to do Kriya Shema before it's possible that 3 hours of the day have passed.
So I would, if you've got a clear day and you've got sunrise and sunset, at least you've got that part. You can work out by the angle of the sun where, say, approximately where the halfway is 45 degrees, and that would be half of the 6 hours. So
Correct.
you could guesstimate that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I've always wondered how Chazal measured time. I mean, without a watch. They didn't. Okay.
They didn't. And if it was a Torah matter, they had to be strict and do it within the period of time that was surely correct. If it was a rabbinic matter, then as long as it's possibly correct, they're okay.
So they didn't even have sundials like some countries had.
Yes, they did, but sundials are accurate to within around an hour a day.
Okay, because I have seen a photograph of a sundial that's got notches on it, so it must be pretty. It's not as accurate as our chronometers, but has some sort of.
The accuracy of a sundial varies greatly through the year. Depends upon the angle of the sun.
Yeah, and where you are also. Okay, Scott. Very interesting. Okay, Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach, Chag Sameach.
A double Chag Sameach.
Yeah, I keep you one. Yeah. Okay.
Rav Fink, that's very interesting. It sounds like one of the main things that someone could achieve by checking their watch right at the last swallow of meat is just creating tension and stress and over the situation.
Perhaps for you, perhaps for other people, it will relieve their tension, and they don't know exactly, and they'll feel a lot calmer, maybe.
But you're saying it's perfectly acceptable that if at the end of eating, that I didn't necessarily know when the last time I ate was, and then perhaps 6 hours could have passed because that's okay. That's not being irresponsible.
Look, when Shabbos is over, if you have no way of knowing the exact time when Shabbos is over, the Shulchan Aruch says Yamtin ad sheyetzei safek milibo. Wait until you have no doubts at all and you're positively sure that Shabbos is over. That's a minat Torah. But as far as the waiting time after meat, you don't have to wait ad sheyetzei safek milibo. You don't have to wait until you have no doubts at all, as long as it's reasonably possible that 6 hours have passed, you can have milk.
Wow. So, and knowing that if someone had after 4.5 or 5.5 hours, it's fine because it's right.
It's only a minhag.
Wow. And how come none of the poskim, when talking about the leniencies, have talked about the immediacy? They only said, if you want to be, whatever, you can go with the 1 hour. But it was clear in the earlier sources that immediate is okay, and then 1 hour, and then 6 hours.
Is this the only issue in the course of halachic history where the people have become stricter that bothers you?
No, no.
Okay.
If it's yeah, go ahead.
Incidentally, it goes the other direction as well. There are tons of halachas which have been forgotten in the course of time. I'll give you a big example.
Well,
The example of hachra'ah. Hachra'ah is a din in the Shulchan Aruch, in Bazeh Machlokes. It's in the Mishnah, it's in the Gemara. Hachra'ah is an absolute halachic requirement. The halachic requirement of hachra'ah works as follows. If you buy in the market 100 grams of peanuts, the merchant puts the peanuts on one pan of the balance, puts 100-gram weight on the other pan of the balance. When the balances are balanced, you know you have 100 grams of peanuts here. Hachra'ah requires the merchant to add a few more peanuts to the pan to be machriya, so that the pan with the peanuts will be heavier, noticeably heavier than the pan with the weight. That's absolutely required. When I came to Israel, not so long ago, it was absolutely standard practice that after the merchant weighed the merchandise and figured out the price, the merchant would add a little bit more merchandise in order to fulfill the halacha of hachra'ah. In the course of 40 years, before my eyes, that halacha has vanished from the world.
I bet some observant shopkeepers would love to hear about it, would love to know about it.
Well,
okay. It's not that much produce, and it's halacha. There'd be
Nachon.
I suppose it wouldn't be that hard to. I mean, I don't want to like let them know. I don't know all the ins and outs, but I it seems like the kind of thing. Like I know some observant shopkeepers that would want to do it. Maybe they're doing it on the digital scale, and I don't know. Is that possible?
Okay. Well, you put the merchandise on the digital scale, and it's 100 grams, costs such and such. Do they add, if it's a bakery, do they add an extra biscuit? Do they add an extra an extra onion? Do they add an extra?
It gets complicated. With peanuts, it's easy. A few peanuts.
An extra
with an onion.
Thomas said, what you think their profit margin? It doesn't depend on how many onions they sell.
Wow, fair enough.
Okay. Tov, be well. Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach. I can't. If it's okay, if I keep asking, I can't get out of. I can't quite understand our relation with the minhagim. You said we do as minhag is as minhag does, in that if I were to do, let's say, hatarat nedarim, like on the Friday morning, as the Sephardic Beit Knesset might do, am I able to rid myself at that point of all of the minhagim that I might have taken on, or that might be prati and not bound by the community, or even ones with the community, or is that not what it does?
The ritual of hataras minhagim, whether it's frequently during the year in Sephardic practice or just before Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur in Ashkenaz practice, accomplishes nothing.
Oh.
Let's wait until Rosh Hashanah comes. We can discuss it in greater detail.
It's a form of tshuva, you're saying. Okay, wow.
Correct.
Wow.
In order to matir, in order to release a minhag, the rules are exactly the same as releasing a neder, and the bet din has to hear, or at least one of the members of the bet din has to hear exactly what the neder or the minhag is.
What if there are minhagim that I don't even know that I'm accidentally doing? At some point, I said I'm not going to.
There's no such thing as a minhag that you don't know you're doing. In order for a minhag to be a minhag, you have to purposely and consciously accept it upon yourself.
So it's very possible that I haven't accepted any.
Quite possible.
That what you're saying? Because okay.
You have to know that something is mutter and nonetheless refrain from it.
Mm.
I've decided to refrain from it, even though I know that it's mutter.
Wow. So if I can't cite it, if I can't pinpoint it, then there's not some hidden minhag, just because I may have followed what someone had done at a Beit Knesset. Like you said, if a coffee's on the table, or if Chalav Yisrael is on the table, then it's not.
People just blindly do what other people doing, maybe thinking that's what the Torah requires.
Got it.
In order for a minhag to be a minhag, you have to know that it's not a halachic requirement. You have to know that such and such is mutter, and nonetheless, I wish to refrain from it, to distance myself. The kavanah is also important. I do it in order to distance myself from any avera. I'm making my own fence around the law so as not to come close to an avera, or I'm doing it for precious in order to live a more ascetic life. Those are the only two acceptable kavanot. I know it's mutter, and I refrain from it either because I want to make my own fence around the law, not to come close to violating something, or because I wish precious to live a more ascetic life.
Wow. Okay. So it's not. That's much more. That's much more manageable.
Take a look at the Yoredea, Simin,
Yoredea.
Reish, Yud, Dalit, plus or minus one.
Ratio
And
Dalit.
plus or minus one, and it's right at the beginning of the siman, and you'll see the rules right there.
Okay.
If you don't find it, let me know. I'll give you the exact reference.
Thank you. I'm sure I will.
Okay. This still means cool?
I don't know what it means in English, but I do it.
I just discovered that okay no longer means cool.
What, this?
Okay, no, okay. The letters okay in response to a question in email or instant messaging. Okay means I'm very unhappy with you, and I'm very disturbed.
I can see what.
If you want to express acceptance, you want to say it's cool, you have to write KK, not okay.
Well, that's I can see why someone would think that. When was okay? When did that mean cool?
Okay meant cool until a few years ago when the meaning changed to okay.
Yeah. I didn't know that it ever meant cool.
I see. And you probably hold your cell phone vertically.
Probably. It depends on the.
You see, the people who are older than you and hold the cell phone horizontally, they're from the generation where okay meant cool.
Oh, there's so much to language. What got you started to learning language, or to understanding the nuances of language, to then linguistics?
Education.
Just learning about the world?
I attended high school. And in high school, I was taught to pay attention to the meaning of words.
It's important.
Mrs. Miller, my sixth grade teacher, said, when you read or when you listen and you hear a word or you see a word that you don't know, you must look it up in the dictionary. And when I made it to graduate school, I was a student of Franz Rosenthal, one of the greatest linguists, one of the greatest linguists of the 20th century. He taught us the time to use a dictionary is when you think you know the meaning of the word.
That's at that level. Oh, that's funny. Oh my God. Does it apply to us down here who are
Yes, dictionaries are someone who does not have precision in expression, why would you care what that person says or writes?
Wow. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, words have not only semantics, not only the meaning of individual words, but syntax, the way the words are put together in a sentence, also has a lot to do with meaning.
Wow. All right. I think we all have a lot of work to do. You've
Yeah.
been putting in the time.
I'll give you a simple example. You'll understand right away. You're a native speaker of English.
Yes.
The sentence structure you use, every native speaker of English uses different sentence structures depending upon what you expect the answer to be. If you expect the answer to be yes, you might structure a question like, you're going to go to the party, aren't you? That's a question which expects yes.
Yeah.
If you change the structure of the sentence, you're no longer expecting a yes answer. Are you going to the party? Now, English, as far as I know, is the only language, well, it's the only language I know, where the expectation of the speaker is incorporated into the structure of the sentence. Other languages do not do this.
Oh, wow.
Now, of course, it's not only the written word, it's also the way the words are pronounced. English is a tonal language. In English, certain syllables are emphasized, and in English, certain words in the sentence are emphasized. Unlike other languages like French, where every syllable and every word gets the same emphasis. Back in the 1960s, there was a public service announcement on television at night. There would be a public service announcement at night on the television. Do you know where your children are? Now that's an amazing sentence. It's really 7 different sentences built into one. And each sentence has a very different meaning. Do you know where your children are? Do you know where your children are? Do you know where your children are? Very different meaning depending upon the emphasis, the way it's pronounced. And an actor on the stage has only the text, and the actor on the stage has to interpret it, has to figure out how to realize it. And depending upon how he realizes it, the meaning is going to be very different.
Wow, English is not simple.
No language.
Maybe language. Yeah. Is English more particularly complex than others, or not necessarily?
No. Look, no, every language is extraordinarily complex. Every language is extraordinarily complex. English has a lot of tenses. Chinese has no tenses.
No tense?
No, there's absolutely no tense system in Chinese. It doesn't make the language easier to learn. It makes it more complicated. In English, it's very simple to express the idea of past, present, future. Chinese, it's not that simple.
How would one do that? How would one even?
Chinese has no distinction between Japanese. Also, Japanese and Chinese have no distinction between singular and plural. Think about it. The translator from Japanese to English has to translate a passage in which the hero looked out the window and saw Shamubein, a guard standing outside. The translator goes to the author and asks, did you mean one guard or guards? And the author says, oh no, never thought about it. But in English, you have to think about it because you have to either guard or guards. He looked out the window and saw a guard, or he looked out the window and saw guards.
Wow.
And that's only the Japanese, the Chinese, those languages happen to be the same in this manner, never thought about singular and plural. Of course, when it's important, they can add the word many or two or three or one.
But they don't have to.
Usually they won't use those words. Of course, they can add the word yesterday, today, tomorrow, now, soon, but usually they don't.
Oh, I see. Okay. There's the option not to, but you could be specific and add it. Huh. I wonder if there is a cultural connection to the idea of simplicity or presence or not overcomplicating. I'm wondering if that has to do with the language or.
No, on the other hand, Japanese distinguishes between all kinds of things that English does not distinguish between. The most famous is ranks in society. You know French or Spanish?
Not really.
But in poco, well, there are two different words depending upon two different ways of talking, depending upon whether you're talking to a friend or someone in the family or a child, as opposed to a stranger. Two different levels of politeness. In Japanese, there are 7 levels of politeness, and they're very precise about your position in society. English has no way of expressing that. Just like Japanese has no way of distinguishing between guard and guards, English has no way of distinguishing between levels of society.
7.
Yeah. The 7th, the top one, is used only in addressing the emperor.
Wow.
And the emperor uses it when speaking about himself as well. And in the radio broadcast after World War II, where the emperor gave up his divinity and declared himself no longer to be a god, he referred to himself in the god level. And he's still referred to that way. If you speak to him, that's the level you have to use.
Wow.
Okay.
Language is fascinating. Thank you. Yeah, it's good to be precise.
Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach. I appreciate this. Have a great day.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.